Hello students, let's explore topic 5, ethical issues, 5.2.2 under Edexcel GCSE Computer Science. The main considerations here for ethical issues um, are things like algorithmic bias. This is an idea that will come up. Ethical issues might be to do related to the data that's being collected. So let's look at an example which will probably come up. Smart speakers. Remember the specification here is 2020, so I know things have come on quite a long way. This is not going to talk about ChatGPT or any of these services that have happened fairly recently. It's the scenario that will likely come up would be a smart speaker. So you've got your sort of your home pod or something like that, or Google Alexa, your Dot, whatever it is, or PDRs, personal digital assistants, PDA, sorry, did I say PDRs, personal digital assistants. This is the scenario that will most likely happen, and it will probably also talk a little bit about AI and machine learning. But again, it's a little bit out of date, so don't start using really, really kind of modern examples. It's this will be in relation to sort of the basics of what artificial intelligence is. It means it's a system that appears intelligent. So I'm going to put appears intelligent. There's no sentient AI out there. There's nothing thinking for itself. Things can they can mimic thought quite well, and you might get tricked into thinking you're having a conversation, but you're really not. Machine learning is large data sets, and this idea of a bias or ethical issues could be in how these data sets are actually used and to train. I mean, because these models are trained, aren't they? Now, of course, how are they trained? For example, who denotes whether content is racist? How do we know if content is racist? It could be context related. It could be about the country that AI and machine learning data set is being harvested in. Certain regions might have a different view of what racism means. So we get a human element. Okay, so essentially human judgment at some point, and that can lead to bias. Anytime you get humans making decisions about what content constitutes as racist and what doesn't, it starts to become a little bit blurry, doesn't it? So ChatGPT, they've sort of had a very fine line, trying to make their content as sort of least offensive as possible, and it does give you warnings and things, but no system is going to be infallible here. Any time where a human still has to steer the algorithms, there's potential for bias there. Let's have a look at some exam questions just to get a better context of what you might actually be asked. So, identify the ethical issue associated with the use of artificial intelligence. Well, the ethical issue here is the algorithms used for the AI system could have some bias in them. They could be sort of steered one way or another, based on what the particular government or company want to sort of define that issue or potential issues, for example racism, as. So that's the only answer there. People use spoken commands to interact with digital assistants. What is one ethical concern? Okay, so you could say data might no longer be private because, so remember this is an explain question, because companies may share it. They may share your data. They might not realize, I can say people might not realize their data is being analyzed. We all blindly kind of accept the small print, don't we? At the bottom, the usage policies. If we actually read through them, we'd probably be shocked at what a lot of these companies can do with our data, whether it's images or voice. In this case, our voice. It's probably picking up on certain keywords. If you are talking about lawnmowers, and then suddenly you get an advert for a lawnmower come up on Facebook, there's probably a reason for that. So those are two you could have there. You only need one to get the marks. It's also unclear who owns that data at some point. Do I own the right to have my voice? Is my voice mine? If it's used to but these are sort of more modern issues to do with sort of deep fakes and mimicking someone's voice. It kind of sort of a lot of ethical kind of issues come up from this, which is where we really need the sort of law to keep up with the technology. Algorithmic bias could be caused by using inaccurate data to train a machine learning algorithm. So state two other ways that data used to train an algorithm could be cause algorithmic bias. So it's given you sort of one, so you need to come up with two more. So what other algorithmic bias? And just keep it simple. You could inaccurate data, but also not enough data. For example, if there's a machine learning algorithm that's meant to help teachers, and they've only asked teachers in the South Coast, well, what about all the teachers that are in different territories or in different countries? They might have their own opinions, and it might be based on more regional issues or wider context issues. So, or maybe they haven't spoken to enough women, for example, and they're just polling men. Not enough data or insufficient data. You could also say, I think the inaccurate data is, we can still go a little bit further than that. We can say biased data, not representing or not representative. I think that might be better. Not representative. There might be some prejudice, but a kind of behaviour in there. There might be some manipulation potentially of data, or it is the data that's been taken is deliberately only from a certain point to avoid bringing in wider contextual issues, which might make the model more accurate or give a more balanced result, for example. I'm just trying to give you an example. When I lived abroad for a long time, and I found that I couldn't enter my apartment because there were gates. It was a gated community, and they hadn't taken into account passports. The country used a different ID system, and passports, somebody just did not have enough data. They didn't think about it, or they didn't want to put that in there. It could have been a combination of all those things. So it caused problems for me, because now a system is preventing me from getting into my own house, and I have to always find somebody to let me in. Okay, good. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of an overview of what an exam question might pertain. It really is quite thin on the ground in relation to AI and machine learning, so I wouldn't get into things like the real minutiae of things like grok and deepfakes, because it's a 2020 spec. So just focus on bias and ethical issues.